Hi everyone, Ben DiBono here to talk about episode 8 of House of the Dragon Season 1, Lord of the Tides, not to be confused with the Barbara Streisand movie, Prince of Tides. Anybody else getting fantasy show whiplash as you're watching this and Rings of Power, where you're like, wait a second, is this the good one or the one where I get called a racist if I point out that it's shit? Uh, this is the good one for those keeping score at home. And boy, was it good. Just to maybe pause on that and then I'll be done talking about Rings of Power. Um, but it's been fascinating how these two shows are in sync. So they both, a week ago, had kind of the big episode with, I won't spoil what's going on in Rings of Power in case you haven't subjected yourself to that, but the big episode where it's like, okay, shit's hitting the fan. And then, as expected, the next episode is going to kind of slow things down and set up for the finale, which will be one more episode in the case of Rings of Power and two more in the case of House of the Dragon. And the contrast couldn't be more strong because where Rings of Power is just sort of, running around like a chicken with its head cut off, doing different, storylines without any sense of purpose or continuity or whatever. House of the Dragon just feels so focused. We care about the characters, which is not something happening on the other show. We care about what's happening to them. There's tension there, what a good episode. What a really, really strong episode. So 6 years later, at least, maybe a little bit more, because Corlys, they said at the beginning, Corlys has been gone for 6 years or whatever it is. I think Rhaenys says that it's been 6 years since she's seen him, so presumably a little bit longer than that since they were together at the end of the last episode. If you're sick of the time jumps and you're sick of the changing actors, which I'm not, actually. I mean, at some point it has to stop, but I think this is it. But I think the show's handled it really, really well. I get that, people have preferences with actors, and especially the actress who played Rhaenyra in the first several episodes was just incredible. And so is Emma Darcy. I think she's doing a good job with this, too. But Millie, whatever her name is, who played her in the first several episodes, was just next level. So, I get people kind of getting a little whiplash from that, but the show's handled it really, really well. And, this episode, I think, was really the Viserys show, which is surprising considering when we see him, it's like, holy crap. This guy get any deader than he already is. With the way the episode ended, where he is dead at the end of the episode. I suppose there's a little bit of ambiguity, but not really. He's gone. I couldn't help but thinking how funny it would be if they just kept having him continue on for every episode, but he's just a little bit more decrepit every time till he's just a skeleton there. I mean, it was pretty close this week. But the Viserys show, so obviously the tension to set it all up is who's going to be the heir of Driftmark and blah, 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 and everybody's showing up, and Corlys is wounded, he's not maybe going to get there, blah, blah, blah. But, it's the Viserys show where that scene at the center of it, and I'm just going to talk about things out of order. I'm assuming you've seen the episode. You don't need me to recap it blow by blow for you. But, that scene at the center of it where they're doing the petitions and he hobbles his way into the throne room was so good. Like, one of the best scenes of the season. And here's a guy who has been a terrible king in many ways. We've talked about it here a lot. He's been an ineffective ruler. He's been willfully naive, both to, the lies he's buying into, maybe intentionally, as well as what's happening with his family. But like that moment where he hobbles in, you're just like, holy shit, I'm ready to bend the knee. This is a guy. There it is. There it is. Whatever it is in him that has failed as a king, maybe failed as a man, it's like there's still something there. And it was on display, and that was just so magnificent. So magnificent. Um, so just to keep it there for a second, all the way up through that scene, and then of course the other great set piece is the family dinner, which we'll talk about in a minute. Um, but you have that going on. You have then all of that explode, and then brother Corliss, I don't remember his name, and it doesn't matter at this point. If we thought that Game of Thrones was being a little, or House of the Dragon was being a little restrained with some of the violence and gore, well, they cut right through it, pun intended, in that moment with Daemon, which I think you could be critical that it was a little more cartoony than the show has typically been, and I'm including the Game of Thrones seasons in that. It wasn't quite as, I mean, it was gross, but it was like almost, Kill Bill, Quentin Tarantino type of violence rather than the more realistic violence. But it was so shocking. I think the only thing I would have liked better than seeing Damon cut through somebody's head, and I don't care if that's actually physically possible. It probably is not. I don't think that you could actually manage to do that. But who cares? It was such a gross, wonderful moment. But the only thing I would have liked better is if Viserys had after he drew his knife, hobbled his way down from the throne and cut out his tongue on his own. But man, and you knew it was coming. It's like he's been threatening this whole season that the next person who calls them bastards, I'm going to have his tongue. And then it's like, okay, if it's now or never, and then he can keep his tongue moment. Oh, so good. So good. So we'll talk about the dinner scene in a moment. A few other things I want to hit on throughout this. So first of all, Damon and Rhaenyra have been busy. They've got at least, they've got two more kids. One of them Viserys and one of them Aegon, which is Aegon the Fourth. Is it the fourth or the third? Hang on, now I'm getting confused because you have Aegon the Conqueror. We have Viserys' son Aegon. Is he the second? I think he's the second. So this must be Aegon the third. Okay, I know there is an Aegon the fourth in the lineage. I may be getting my Targaryen family tree confused. Nonetheless, it's another Aegon. So, if you've seen Game of Thrones, we've got a few more of them to go. Culminating with a very particular Aegon, who I won't spoil just in case anybody out there has not watched the main show. So we have that going on, and then, we have sort of the tension, alliance between Rhaenyra and Rhaenys, and that was really good. I might have liked to see them go a little bit more with it. That's like, if you're going to be critical of the time jump, and again, I'm not, but, the fact that we have this natural alliance between Rhaenyra and Rhaenys, and really all of House Valerian, and then you have them essentially, well, they don't kill Laenor, but they Rhaenys doesn't know that, Corlys doesn't know that, and so there's some heavy tension there. And I would have liked to see maybe a little bit more of that, though I also do like the way it resolved itself with Rhaenys taking their side, taking the offer, really taking Corlys's words to heart that it's not about, blood, it's about names, and that was really that decision. And kind of a nice character moment for Rhaenys, where she was disagreeing with Corlys in the last episode, and then here just really, as he's lying in whatever decrepit state he's in. Hopefully he's doing better than Viserys. But, taking his side there. That was really nice. The other thing that was really good in this, and I'd be interested to see how critics handle this moment, is the delicate situation in Aegon's bedroom. So, people have been critical of Game of Thrones over the years for sexual violence and everything. And I think, and I haven't been. Obviously, you could go moment to moment, and I'm sure we could find some that we look at and say, yeah, we could have handled that better. But it's a violent world. It's a evil world. And the show doesn't pull any punches, and it doesn't pull any punches for anybody. And that's part of that reality. If you cut all that stuff out, you're actually not doing the show or anybody any favors. Yes, it's brutal to the point where it's not going to be everybody's cup of tea. Fair enough, but I don't think it's fair to criticize the show for depicting violent, evil acts when that is at the core of what the show is about. But this was really different with the way they approached it here. We don't see the act. Instead, we see, really the serving girl's reaction to it. And then we see Allison's reaction to it. Allison, in this moment, just, what a bitch. Like, the way that she manipulates this girl. And yes, she's doing it for her son and everything, but, and maybe you don't hold it against her because of the times that they're in. It's, a different time, as we all have to remind ourselves when watching this show. But you see how she just, manipulates her. And yeah, she's angry at Aegon, but this is about protecting her son. This is not about helping this girl. And it couldn't be more apparent there. So I think that if people are going to be critical of the show for having those elements, they should also give it credit for a really delicate's the wrong word, but taking a different tact with this one. And I think I think being very insightful with all of the aspects of sexual violence. That, of course, there's the perpetrator, who is problem number one, but then there's enablers. There's people who maybe don't approve, but yet through their actions allow it and encourage it tacitly to continue. And so, kudos to the show for that. We'll see if it gets any recognition or credit for that. Okay, so then the family dinner is great, and this is where, to maybe jump off of the whole thing with Aegon. So with Aegon, now there's shades of Joffrey from the main series with him, as he's abusing women and doing horrible things. But his brother's not much better. Aemond is the king of the creepy stairs. Holy shit. Aemond's just fantastic with that eye patch. I don't know the actor who's playing him, but wow. In fact, I don't know if I'm the only one, but I got strong vibes, especially in the end of the family dinner when everything blows up, that it kind of feels like there's aspects of his performance that are being informed by Malcolm McDowell from Clockwork Orange. Especially when he's giving that toast. I don't know. That's how it struck me. We'll see if that continues. But it feels like there's maybe a little bit of Alex DeLarge in that performance, which I'm totally there for. Fantastic. But the family dinner was so good. And it's another thing that I just love about this show and the way they're approaching it, and especially a heavy contrast to those last two seasons of Game of Thrones, where, and again, I'm not as much of a hater as a lot of people, but they're moving at such a pace, and then to have moments like this where you just let this scene happen and you let it breathe and you let it unfold. And Viserys is so good in this, and he makes this heartfelt plea to his family. It's like he knows that nobody has listened to him up to this point, that he has held this peace by sheer willpower. He knows that this is it. This is the end. He doesn't have long to live. He's basically a walking skeleton. When he takes off his mask, it's so gross, but also so heartfelt, as he's just, like, the mask literally, but also figuratively, is off. There's nothing to hide. I am this old man. I am dying. This is it. I love you all. Please don't do this. It was such a good moment. So good. And then it starts to work, and they're doing the toasts, and it feels like maybe it's genuine, kinda, sorta, as genuine as these people can be with each other. And, not all of them. I think Otto's sitting there like, can this bullshit. But the rest of them are buying into it, and Viserys is so close to getting his wish. And then Aemon makes his toast to 3 strong boys. Oh, what a moment. What a moment. And what's so heartbreaking about it is that you can read Alicent a lot of different ways, and she's kind of vacillated between Machiavellian and then trying to be genuine. And I think in this moment she's in her genuine state. And then she wants things to work. I don't think she's bullshitting. In fact, if I'd say who's bullshitting with the toast, I'd put much more likely that Rhaenyra is than Alicent. And then Aemon stands up and he does that, and the whole thing blows up, and it's so good. It's so good. And then we end with the Viserys not knowing who he's talking to in his final moments. And I haven't been a big fan of the inclusion of a Song of Ice and Fire prophecy, in part because, with the way Season 8 ended, it just feels like small potatoes, ultimately. And I think the books will, should they ever get written, the final books, will be a much better job of that, but, the whole long night thing kind of petered out a bit at the end of the show, so it feels like an odd choice to hitch your wagon to that, but well used here, where he picks up the conversation from Rhaenyra earlier in the episode. He is speaking to Alicent, but he doesn't think it's her. She doesn't know that, and now we're set up for the powder keg that is next week. If you watch the preview for next week, you have a sense of what that looks like. If you didn't, I'm not going to spoil anything because you're wanting to watch it just without seeing any previews or anything. But shit's about to hit the fan. And this was the calm before the storm. Not all that calm. Ultimately, a guy did get his head cut in half. But another great episode. What a fantastic show. I'm really enjoying this more even than I hoped to, and I hope to a lot. I've been a big fan of the source material for way longer than it's been a show. I've been a big fan of the show, yes, including through seasons 7 and 8, for as problematic as they were with wrapping up that story, as for all the poor choices they made. I love this world, and yet for House of the Dragon to come out and put together a first season like this, they have just built to something where what's going to happen these next 2 episodes and then continue on into the next seasons is so earned, and they've built it carefully. They've taken a lot of risks this season with things that could have gone wrong, all the time jumps and everything, but they did it. And now we're here. Viserys is gone, the powder keg is lit, and we're about to see it blow, and I'm so there for it. It's going to be phenomenal. Alright guys, that's it for this week. I'm looking forward to the next 2. I think we got a great finale coming up. Bendy Bono, I'll talk to you guys later.